Hey everybody, this is my 20-gallon angelfish tank, and I have been treating it for some really thick mats of cyanobacteria I had growing across the bottom of the tank. It actually looked like a green lawn not too long ago. I did shoot some video of it before we got started on this process, so I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of a look, at least at what this side over here looks like. So this is what it looked like before. So you can see it's not completely dead and cleared up yet, but we're getting pretty close. This side was just as bad as the other, and this side looks a lot more cleared up, and I suspect that is because of the current. We've got the water flowing out of the filter right here. It's hitting this side of the tank and running down the glass, and this side, if you put food in the tank, you can see it swirls around over here, and then by the time everything gets to this side of the tank, with all that woodwork and plants and everything in the middle, even with this air stone, I've got much flow and current over here. So the way the treatment works, the Chemiclean treatment that I'm using, it oxidizes the single-celled bacteria. I don't know the exact process, but it's not an antibiotic. It doesn't kill it in that sense. It actually does oxidize it, and that's why you have to have the air stone in there to really jack up the gas exchange in the tank so there's as much oxygen available as possible for this process to happen. And in order for it to happen, it has to come in contact with the cyanobacteria. So the more circulation you get during the process, the more effective it'll be. And you can kind of see in there little bits of it are sort of flapping loose and moving around. Again, it was in sheets all the way across the bottom over here, and it's already just sort of broken up and disintegrated and gone. Now, a couple of points to make before we get in and actually start removing it, because I am going to set up the tripod and we're going to do a video of actually removing what's on the bottom. Normally, I would have gotten in there first and done a gravel vac and got as much of the cyanobacteria out of there as I physically could have, and then I would have gone in and done the treatment. But for this particular video, I wanted to leave it as thick and matted in there as possible to give you an example of what it would look like if you were trying to treat a tank that was really, really heavily infested with the cyanobacteria, and that's why I left it alone and completely intact. I think you'll still be surprised at how easily most of that just comes right up and out of there. It's probably not as alive as it looks. I know it looks nice and bright green on the surface, but the underneath where it's actually lying on the rocks itself is probably not so healthy. And again, over here, it's already all broken up and almost completely gone and removed. Now, I did not do one single treatment on this either. One treatment is supposed to be for 48 hours. You do a water change, and then if you want to do another treatment, you can go ahead and do another water treatment. I did not do the water change. I seldom do. I find that it's not really that big of a deal. I did do a second treatment. I let it run for 2 days, and then I did do about a 50% water treatment or water change, and then I put a third dose in yesterday morning. So it's been almost 48 hours since I put the third small dose in, just as kind of a last little oomph on it, because I knew today I'd be getting in here and doing the actual removal. So that was not one single dose to do this much damage to that cyanobacteria in there. That was a couple of good whammy doses, and then a third sort of final, I'd call it a full dose, but it wasn't like an extra heavy duty dose or anything like that on the third go around. The first two doses were probably a little heavier than they needed to be. At any rate, let me get started on this. I'm going to pull that air stone out of there, and then we are going to set up a vac, and we're going to siphon that right off of the bottom, and I'll show you what I'm doing when we get to that. So sit tight, and I'll see you in half a second. All right, now I'm just using a regular old vinyl hose. I've got no gravel vac on the end of this, so I've got to be careful not to suck any fish up, but I also have to be careful not to suck a bunch of gravel off the bottom. So you got to be kind of delicate when you do this. So let me get it started. See how it just lifts right up in sheets, comes right off the bottom. So it will bring some of the gravel with it. Not too concerned about that. What I do is I do my best just to pour as much of the water out as I can. I leave some of the water and the gravel in the bottom. I just leave it blacked out in a dark room for, or I just leave it in a dark corner for a little while, week or so, and anything that was in it that would have still been alive is dead after a week of being blacked out like that. And so I can then just go ahead and rinse the gravel off if I want. I can go ahead and even do like a hydrogen peroxide treatment on the gravel or whatever, and then I can just go ahead and dump the gravel right back into the tank. I'm also sucking a bunch of mulm and stuff that's in the corners that's a little more difficult to get out with the regular gravel vac. This obviously has much more suction power to it than the gravel vac does. And so some of the dead snail shells and some of the bigger chunks come up out of there a lot easier. Alright, and that's about it for that 5-gallon bucket. So give me a moment and we'll have a look at the tank before the water change, and then we'll have a look again once it's done, and we'll have some final thoughts when we wrap it up. Alright, and there is the finished product. Now, as I suspected, a lot of the green that's on the glass is actually algae. I don't worry about the right-hand side. In fact, I like that side to be a little bit dirty. It obscures the view between the two tanks, and then that way I don't have to worry about the fish over here interacting with the fish over there. And I can't really see in that side of the tank anyway, so I don't worry about it. I do keep that end of the tank clean because I can look through the far end from the other room and I can see into the tank. So that end and the front get kept relatively clear. But for as much vacuuming as I did while I was in there, and as much of that mulm and crud and stuff that I pulled out, when I refilled the tank, I made sure I ran the water in there like a garden hose. I let it really pour into the tank and swirl it up and stir it all around. And despite putting a new filter pad in there and letting it run for about an hour, you can still see that big pile of mulm in the back. That's all just sort of crud that swirled around and kind of got dropped there. Might be a big chunk of the Marimo moss ball, but I think that's probably just mulm and stuff that's piled up. I got in and really rooted through the Java fern there, and in the base of that is a lot of mulm and crud and whatnot. What I didn't get was a lot of green cyanobacteria. So I think my treatment did more than I originally anticipated. I know it looked really green when we first started, and you can see there is still some on the end of that piece of wood right there. As I said, there's probably a few little specks here and there that are still going to be, there enough to be visible. And we are talking about a single-celled organism, so whether it's visible or not, I'm sure I didn't kill every single cell in the entire tank, and it is just a matter of time before it comes back. But I do want to point out that I do not use the Chemiclean as much as it may seem. I am going to do a video where I talk more about this specifically, but I looked back at this tank, and specifically I was telling to somebody that I only do a treatment on most of my tanks, and that is most of the tanks that get treatment. A lot of my tanks don't even get a Chemiclean treatment because they never really have a need for it. But out of the tanks that do for some reason, I never treat them more than twice a year. And in fact, I went back to double check on this tank just to see how long it had been since the last time I had done a treatment, and it's been almost 6 months to the week that I did a treatment on this tank. So it's about twice a year that I'm doing treatments on these tanks that get really heavily grown like that. And also keep in mind that the only reason I even did that video was because I just wanted to do it as a demonstration video. I really could have just done a gravel vac and got most of that stuff out of the tank, and it would not have been necessary to do the actual treatment. So that's twice a year, and I'm doing it sometimes for demonstration purposes. So again, it's not like this stuff isn't effective or I've got to keep using it over and over and over again. It really does do a good job cleaning up the tank. But like anything else, you know, time goes on, and if you're having issues with that kind of stuff, it's going to get dirty again and you're going to have to clean it again. As far as how to make sure your cyanobacteria problem doesn't come back, you're going to have to ask somebody else. I long ago gave up trying to figure that out. I don't know why it grows in some tanks and not others. Half the time when I would try to do stuff to make it go away, it would get worse. Sometimes I would ignore it completely and it would get better. Again, it's just easier to use the Chemiclean. I just don't worry about it. I do a treatment, I do a water change, and I'm done. I forget about it, and the tank looks like this, so not a big deal. Anyway, I will put a link down below to the Chemiclean if that's something you're interested in, as always. And there you go. That's a look at what the tank looks like now that it's been nice and cleaned up. And of course, we are going to stay on top of keeping the water sprite under control in this tank too. I'm not going to make it as bushy and overgrown as it was before, because I like the way the tank looks when the light shines in there, although it does really make my algae grow out of control. So we'll see what happens. So there you go. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss anything else I got going on. And then don't forget, of course, this one is my 20-gallon angelfish tank. So thanks again. I'll see you real soon in the next one.